individual and systematic risk, how to report and respond to serious incidents. Before we dive into our content, let's review a few housekeeping things. Please post all questions in the question and answer box. The chat function, participant microphones, cameras are automatically disabled for webinars with large numbers of participants. This webinar is being recorded, and the presentation, the recording, and frequently asked questions will be posted to the DBHDS Office of Licensing public webpage. Training overview. Today's training includes CRIS reporting expectations, reporting CRIS issues, serious incident report updates, specialized investigation unit, addressing NWAMS version 3.3 ISP risk, incident examples, monitoring serious incident, risk management and quality improvement, licensing reports, incident data, and contact information. CRIS reports expectations. Providers have 24 hours to submit serious incident reports into CRIS. The serious incident report submitted within 24 hours must include information specified by the department as required in its web-based reporting application, which is CRIS. For serious injuries and deaths, the provider should complete the following: description of circumstances, medical treatment provided and/or the findings, identified solutions to mitigate reoccurrence of incident when applicable, external notifications made, and provider's corrective action. Some important questions to ask yourself before submitting the serious incident report are as follows. Is there enough information to support the report of a level 2 or level 3 serious incident? Is there enough information to assure the health, safety, and welfare of the individual is being addressed? Does the narrative present a clear and complete picture of the incident and the provider's response? This includes ensuring the appropriate internal notifications were made depending on the type of incidents. For example, law enforcement, adult protective services, or child protective services. Is the narrative consistent with the boxes that are checked? If medical attention was sought, is there a clear description of the medical treatment provided and any preliminary findings? Has the provider documented at least preliminary corrective actions taken or to be taken to address any potential concerns raised by the incident and or to reduce the risk of a reoccurrence of the incident? Is the appropriate contact name and information provided? Reporting CRIS issues. If a provider is unable to report a serious incident into CRIS due to a CRIS system error or a network outage, the provider must notify the Office of Licensing's Incident Management Unit via email within 24 hours of the discovery date of the incident at incident_management@dbhds.virginia.gov. If a provider is unable to access both the CRIS system or email for reasons outside the provider's control, Then the provider may notify the Regional Incident Management Unit representative by phone. Any other needed support may be requested through Delta at deltaprod@dbhds.virginia.gov. When reporting CRIS issues to the incident management box, please include a detailed description of the issue and a screenshot of the issue. To reset your password or to unlock your account, please contact Delta Production at deltaprod@dbhds.virginia.gov. To report a late abuse or neglect case to the Office of Human Rights, please send an email to your regional advocate. Per the guidance sent out to providers are required to have a backup person to enter incidents into the CRIS system when an individual is locked out. That information can be found in a memo titled CRIS Updates, which was issued in October 2019. It states, beginning October the 7th, 2019, the Incident Management Unit will be issuing corrective action plans statewide for all 5 regions for all incidents not reported within the required 24-hour time frame. We are anticipating this impact to this change within the Office of Licensing to be minimal as providers work diligently to comply with regulations. In preparation for this upcoming date, we would like to remind you of the following requirements. All incident reports must be submitted within 24 hours when an incident is discovered. All providers are required to have a backup person to enter incidents into CRIS. When one individual is locked out of CRIS, the backup individual will be able to submit the incident within the 24-hour time frame. All providers must notify the Office of Licensing Incident Management Unit at incident_management@dbhds.virginia.gov instead of their licensing specialist when they are unable to enter an incident into CRIS because of the system is down. The guidance document on incident reporting requirements states, please note that these methods of reporting an incident in place of submitting an incident report to the CRIS system will be deemed as non-compliant and the provider will be cited. Number 1, reporting a serious incident to the provider's licensing specialist via email or phone call. Number 2, reporting a serious incident to the provider's human rights advocate via email or phone call. Number 3, reporting the incident to any other representative of DBHDS by any means other than through the incident management reporting function in CRIS. And number 4, reporting an allegation of abuse or neglect that also meets the criteria for level 2 or level 3 serious incident only on the DBHDS Office of Licensing side, Office of Human Rights side of CRIS instead of reporting the incident on both the Office of Human Rights and the Office of Licensing sides of CRIS. Serious incident report updates. When a death or serious incident has all necessary information, please select death/serious incident complete and no further updates will be provided. This is inside your CRIS report. When there is additional information that needs to be added to the incident report, please select updates to the death/serious incident report will be provided. The provider may have 2 additional business days to update the report with any remaining information that might have been unknown at the time that the report was written. At the bottom of the CRIS report, go under Please indicate which fields have been updated and list the names of the section that has new information. Once the information has been updated, scroll down to the bottom of the screen to the area titled Required. Please select one from the following and check the box titled An update to this death/serious incident report has been provided, and then hit the Save button. Other updating expectations. Check boxes in CRIS. This is important. Please check all appropriate check boxes that are applicable to the incident in the following sections: the injury, illness and condition, and cause. Updates should be made to both the checkbox fields for data collection purposes and the narrative fields for the licensing and investigations team. Submitting serious incidents with related abuse and neglect allegations. When submitting an incident that involves abuse or neglect, please enter the abuse and neglect allegation on the Office of Human Rights side of CRIS first. Please input the abuse and neglect counter number in the CRIS incident report in the CRIS abuse number field. This number, as outlined on the screen, will begin with the year that you are entering the report, followed by 4 additional numbers. This is important as this number helps connect the CRIS incident report on the abuse side of CRIS into the Connect system. And now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Rebecca Greenfield.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Rebecca Greenfield, and I am part of the SIU team supporting Region 1. Today, I'm going to spend some time sharing tips and reminders regarding the MRC process. Next slide, please. The Office of Licensing contains a group of staff known as the Specialized Investigation Unit, or SIU. SIU was established in 2020 as a part of an effort to reduce the workload of the regional licensing specialists and to help the department come into compliance with several DOJ indicators. SIU is responsible for completing investigations for all DD deaths and all DD complaints reported to the Office of Licensing. While the licensing specialist will no longer be looking into DD deaths or DD complaints, the licensing specialists continue to review and investigate other DD serious incidents and respond as necessary to any mental health or substance abuse complaints, deaths, or serious injuries. In 2019, the Mortality Review Committee, or MRC, issued a memo that requires all DDHDS licensed providers to submit documentation per the MRC checklist to the MRC for any individuals with a developmental disability who was receiving licensed services within 3 months prior to the individual's death. The link to the memo and the MRC checklist, which includes documentation that is required to be submitted, can be found on the DDHDS Office of Licensing website under the heading Mortality Review Committee. The MRC checklist and MRC memo can also be directly accessed from CRIS. When you are entering a Level 3 serious incident that involves the death of an individual with a diagnosis of developmental disability, you will need to check the box that states, "By checking here, I acknowledge responsibility for providing these documents." The submission of MRC documents are required for all individuals with a developmental disability who were receiving DDHDS licensed services regardless of whether they have a DD waiver. There are circumstances that would not require a CRIS report to be submitted following the death of an individual with a DD diagnosis. If an individual diagnosed with DD was not an active admission to a licensed service at the time of death, a CRIS report does not have to be entered. This includes individuals who were receiving case management monitoring or follow-along services, and there was not a formal ISP, quarterly progress notes, etc. in place. This also includes individuals who were discharged from the licensed service prior to death. In this instance, while the licensed provider is not required to submit a CRIS report, if they were providing licensed services to the individual within 3 months prior to their passing, MRC documents must be submitted. It is possible that you as a provider will not be knowledgeable of the death of an individual that has been discharged from your service. In this case, an SIU investigator will contact the provider to inform them of the individual's passing and the need for MRC documentation to be submitted. Please note that the submission of MRC documents is a requirement, and failure to submit documentation could result in a licensing report. Providers have 10 business days to submit documentation to the MRC email address from the date of discovery. Documentation shall be submitted directly to the MRC email address found on this slide. Please note that there is an underscore between MRC and documents in the email address. Initial submissions must be submitted to the MRC email address, not directly to the SIU investigator. Once the SIU investigator begins to review the records, they may reach out to schedule interviews or request additional documentation. For requests that come directly from the SIU investigator, the requested documents can be sent to the investigator. Please note that all submissions of MRC documents must be submitted as an encrypted email. If your agency does not have access to encrypted email, please email the MRC email and request an encrypted email. It is important that providers follow the naming conventions as identified on the checklist. For example, ABC Group Home _Doe _Jane _medical records. While it says that the records should be scanned in, if your agency utilizes an electronic health record, it is completely acceptable to upload documents directly from your EHR and submit one checklist that represents all of the files submitted. If you are scanning and uploading documentation, please use the checklist as a cover page for each file to identify what information can be found in that file. The MRC checklist is a fillable form. If you are using an MRC checklist that is not a fillable form, it is not the most recent version and can be found on the DDHDS Office of Licensing webpage or directly from the CRIS system. Documentation that is required to be submitted includes all parts of the ISP, including any protocols that are specific to the individual. The most current provider-specific assessments, which may include assessments such as the comprehensive assessment, fall risk assessment, functional behavior analysis if completed, and so on. The current CIS, the current VIDES, and any other assessments completed, such as the annual risk assessment, on-site visit tool, risk awareness tool, or crisis risk assessment tool as applicable. You will also need to submit progress notes, incident reports, and medical records for the 3 months prior to the individual passing away, a copy of the most recent annual physical, and the last quarterly review. Additionally, you will need to submit any root cause analyses, or RCAs, completed over the 3 months prior to the individual passing, and the discharge summary. While the previously mentioned documents are required to be submitted within 10 business days, it is understood that the provider has 30 days to complete the RCA and discharge summary. If these documents are not included with the initial submission, the provider is responsible for ensuring the RCA and discharge summary are submitted to the MRC email within 30 days. With that being said, we would like to encourage you to take advantage of the full 30 days to complete an RCA in order to be able to provide a detailed description of what happened, an analysis of why it happened, including identification of all identifiable underlying causes of the incident that were under the control of the provider, and identified solutions to mitigate its reoccurrence and future risk of harm when applicable. We encourage you to take time to complete a thorough review of documentation, including recent progress notes, incident reports, medical records, and so on, in addition to any interviews as appropriate so that a comprehensive analysis can be completed. It is also important that you follow your own policies to determine when a more detailed RCA shall be completed. Please note the regulations identify a death that occurs as a result of an acute medical event that was not expected in advance or based on the person's known medical condition shall require a more detailed RCA. If you would like more training or resources regarding the RCA, please go to the DBHDS Office of Licensing website and look under the Quality Improvement Risk Management Resources for Licensed Providers section found under the heading Training and Technical Assistance. As part of completing the RCA, when 911 was involved, we are encouraging providers to FOIA the 911 audio to obtain a clear picture of what happened during the incident. We have found that there are times that there are discrepancies between the information provided to the 911 dispatcher and the information provided to the agency by the staff after the fact. Additionally, we highly recommend that providers incorporate emergency medical scenarios into their emergency preparedness policies and procedures. Deaths can be very traumatic. By practicing emergency medical scenarios with staff, they will be better equipped to handle an actual medical emergency. Just to reiterate, all emails sent to the MRC email address must be encrypted. Each file must be less than 25 megabytes. If the file is larger, there is a good chance that some of the documentation submitted will be removed, and there is no way to determine what information has been removed. If required documentation is missing, you will be hearing from one of the lovely and talented SIU investigators. Please make sure that all files are in a PDF format, not Word. If the documentation you are going to submit is in a Word document, please convert it to a PDF prior to sending it in. Again, I would like to reiterate the importance of following the naming conventions. If your file exceeds 25 megabytes, please submit multiple files identifying how many files include like information. This is often required for progress notes. An example can be found on the screen identifying part 1 of 2 and part 2 of 2. At the end of this presentation, there will be a list of contact information for all of the SIU investigators across the state. This information and a map can also be found on the DBHDS Office of Licensing website. If you have any questions regarding SIU, you may reach out to the SIU manager, Angelica Howard. Thank you very much for your time. Next, you will hear from Eric Williams.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Good morning, this is Eric Williams. I'm the Director of Provider Development at DBHDS. It's good to be with you. I was asked to cover basically 2 topics today. So I want to provide a brief overview of updates to the ISP 3.3 that is scheduled for release in WAMS in May. So the second thing I want to talk about is really the relationship between the risk awareness tool, also called the RAT, and the ISP itself. So we've worked with the Office of Integrated Health and with DMAS to kind of clarify how the RAT informs the ISP, how you use it to identify and address risk, and then include that information into the supports and the planning process. I'll spend less time on the brief overview of the ISP and more time on the RAT. So let's go ahead to the next slide, and I'll provide you an introduction to our office. So we have community resource consultants located in every region of the state, and we've organized ourselves into 3 teams. So we have the individual team, the provider team, and the system team. The individual team is who you contact if you have questions about the HCBS settings regulations, if you have situations that involve an individual, so crisis situations, constituent concerns, that type of information, as well as the regional support team process. If you're a provider and you have questions about waiver services or about the ISP, you would contact your provider team contact. If you're a support coordinator and you're concerned with systems issues, policy regulation, you would contact the systems team. We do have a couple of roles that are carved out. We have Ashley Painter, she's our statewide regional support team coordinator. Sarah Thompson is our new statewide supported decision-making lead. And then we have recently added Stephanie Subetti, who is the employment specialist. So we'll get this updated out to folks as soon as possible. So on the next slide, we'll go ahead and provide a summary of the updates to the ISP version 3.3. One of the first significant changes was we increased the character limits wherever possible. So the standard was 3,000 characters per text box, and we have doubled that to 6,000 wherever we could without disrupting the user interface. So many fields are now increased to 6,000 characters. The rest of the changes take place in Part 2 Essential Information and Part 5 Plan for Supports. So we added a few elements for supported decision making, which will be introduced in the next month or two through training sessions. We've removed 4 medical elements and added 7. We restructured the employment and community integration section so that there are more discrete elements and the ability to provide responses for individual topics related to those conversations around employment and community integration. In Part 5, we had received multiple requests from providers to incorporate support instructions into the WAMS ISP. So we've made that adjustment and then also added space for a backup plan for required services. So you go on to the next slide. So this is what the view looks like for supported decision-making. There's just a simple question about whether or not the person has a supported decision-making agreement. If yes, the date of the agreement, and then the types of decisions that are supported under that agreement. Again, we expect that there will be training in the next month or two related to this process. And so stay tuned. More information will be coming about this. All right, this is the physical and health conditions section in the essential information. We added 7 elements that you see here. There is a couple of questions there at the top that relate to current diagnoses, current medical conditions or health protocols, and the rest of the elements relate to history. So if there's a past history of medical conditions, hospitalizations, surgeries, mental health conditions, or psychiatric hospitalizations, this is where that information would live and be kept. I think previous version of the ISP did not have as much of a thorough look at the person's history. So we've added these to enhance the content of the plan. Right, on the next slide. When you select one of those areas, such as current medical conditions or health protocols, etc., there's going to be a space there to list the medical conditions or list the protocols. So you really just want to think in terms of a bulleted list that describes each of those conditions, protocols, or hospitalizations, etc. All right, on the next slide, for those discrete elements around employment and integrated community involvement discussions, if you mark yes, that the conversation included a particular topic, there will be a box that will open up and provide space for providing some narrative related to that specific topic. This was done to ensure that the conversations are meaningful and do include all of the topics that are listed, that are appropriate. All right, next slide. So now the bulk of our presentation today is focusing on this section, which is the risk awareness tool. So this tool is completed by the support coordinator annually. It identifies health risks that are related to mortality for people with DD that were identified in the last 12 months. And then it supplements the existing information in Part 2, which is what we just talked about, those new 7 elements. So things that are popping up during the course of the ISP year in the past 12 months get identified through the risk awareness tool or RAT and then added to the essential information. So in that way, it's supplemental. It helps inform the essential information, which in turn informs planning. The tool does something else though. It also identifies potential health risks. And these are things that based on the assessment, we suspect based on that review, but we're not sure if that risk or health condition is true. So generally there's a referral that occurs to a qualified professional who confirms the diagnosis related to that particular issue, which in turn makes its way into the plan. Typically that's a team discussion. The support coordinator typically writes parts 1 through 4, as you may know. But it is sort of a team process, and then the providers would add information to their part 5 once things are confirmed. So on the next slide, we'll look at the fact that the risk awareness tool looks at risk in 11 key areas, and it does have a summary page, which is uploaded into WAMS. So that's the content of the RAT. On the next page, you're going to see one of the elements. The tool proceeds in a step-by-step process. Generally, step 1 of each of the diagnoses, of potential diagnoses, highlighted here in yellow, looks for whether or not a person has received a diagnosis for that condition in the last 12 months. So if you have a yes in this box, it's going to show up as confirmed on the summary page, and there's going to be an expectation that that need is addressed in the ISP. There should be an outcome, related supports, and instructions for that particular need. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that the lower half, the additional steps, steps 2 and 3, speak more on the potential for a risk. Yeah, go ahead to the next slide. Speak to a potential risk. So in general, potential risks, you want to ensure that they are confirmed by a qualified professional before you start to stand up outcomes and formal supports for them. There is a possibility that a person could decline a referral to a healthcare professional when you're looking at a potential risk, and in that case, the tool is going to ask the team if the individual has a plan in place that currently kind of mitigates that risk, and if it doesn't, the team should really work and discuss ways to ensure the person's health and safety under current services when they decline that referral. So either the plan addresses it, or the team is going to have some discussion about what we need to put in place to help the person be healthy and safe. Okay, so on the next slide. This is a summary page. Again, the yellow highlighting is related to new diagnoses or new concerns. So anything indicated with a check mark here on the summary page is expected to be addressed in the ISP. Typically, these needs would have supports related to them. You'd want to track and monitor and include them in your quarterly report. So there would be an outcome or outcomes that encompass these particular needs. In this example, pressure injury is identified as a new diagnosis, so you know that that's going to need to be addressed in the ISP. All right, on the next slide, you're going to see here those 7 elements again. So any new or existing diagnoses or health concern has to go into the ISP, and this is a section that you would use to add that information. You always want to remember that the supports that are developed for that need are specific to each individual rather than applied across everyone in the setting, right? So this is a person-centered plan. Supports are based on the person's needs. So on the next slide, you'll see an example of where you would put pressure injury if it was identified on the RAT. So here are their current health protocols. If yes, list. There could be needs already listed there from the person's history, and you would add that newly identified need to this section as well. So go ahead to the next slide, and there'll be an example of how that actually is done. So for this individual, you'll notice that current medical conditions include osteoporosis, epilepsy, hypertension, high cholesterol, and now pressure injury, because that was identified on the risk awareness tool. So this is what it looks like populated in WAMS directly. You see the list of medical conditions first. You see the list of health protocols. There are 2. You see a history of surgeries. And then you'll notice down at the bottom, there are special diet or nutritional needs, which is a low salt DASH diet. Go on to the next slide. And you may be familiar, if you're familiar with the ISP, you're familiar with this section. So this is what we had prior to having these new 7 elements. And basically it's a space that is used in an ISP to describe current related support needs for those health and behavioral conditions. And the idea is that you describe the support needs in this section, and then this section is used to help inform outcome development and plan development going forward. So in this example, you see gentle touch due to osteoporosis with routine repositioning to prevent pressure injury, seizure protocol to manage safety before, during, and after seizures, low salt DASH diet to address hypertension and high cholesterol. So in bold there at the bottom, you'll see how those supports are speaking to that person's health conditions. Okay, on the next slide. This is what it looks like once it's developed with the team during the annual plan meeting. These are 3 outcomes that encompass those same support needs. So Mia follows her nutritional plan so that she has stable blood pressure and lowered cholesterol. Mia follows her seizure protocol in order to be safe before, during, and after seizures. And then Mia participates in her repositioning protocol so that she does not have injury due to osteoporosis or pressure sores. Following through the process, you'll see the different supports listed and the services that will provide those supports, those key steps that will help the person get to a positive result. All right, so on the next slide, this is the part 5. So you'll notice that one of the new elements that you'll see here is how to support, which is that space for the support instructions that we did not have previously. You'll notice that the outcome here is Mia follows her nutritional plan so that she has stable blood pressure, lowered cholesterol, and I apologize, swallows safely. We ended up modifying this example, so don't worry about that one. That's a typo. But Mia goes grocery shopping weekly. So Mia can identify 3 preferred food items that fit within her diet once a week for 6 weeks. What do you record? Yes or no to indicate if 3 items were selected by Mia. It is skill building, and she's making food selections. She's doing this on a weekly basis. We have a target date, and then we have the instructions there at the bottom on how staff support her with that. So that sort of encompasses one of the support activities related to her outcome for following her nutritional plan. All right, so on the next slide. Next, we're going to move into not the identified risks or the known risks, but the potential risks. And these are things that would need to be confirmed by a qualified professional. So let's go ahead to the next slide. And on that summary page, if we move over to the next column, you'll see that potential risk identified here in orange are those things that we suspect or we think based on the completion of the RAT might be true. And we would want to work with the person to identify a healthcare professional that they can visit and get a consultation and have that be confirmed so that it can be planned for. You would handle a little bit differently if the person declines to go to a doctor for something that you suspect. And so we'll talk about that in a moment. All right, so on the next slide. So once potential risks are confirmed, so the person goes ahead and says, yes, I want to go to my doctor and be assessed for this. And so once the healthcare professional confirms that that diagnosis is true or that those risks are true, then the support coordinator and the team would complete a progress note. They would update the essential information and add outcomes and supports as needed to address that new diagnosis and those new risks. Referrals should be as soon as possible, and all efforts, plans, and delays that are encountered in the referral process should be documented. So always make sure that you're telling the story from the time that a need is identified, a potential need is identified on the RAT, to the person gets the consultation, to the time you add it to the plan. So if anything is delaying that process, make sure you document that. All right. Now, we're going to talk about when consultation is declined. So if a person says, you know, I hear you, I understand that you think that I might be at risk for something, but I don't want to see a doctor. So you want to make sure as a team that you are ensuring that health and safety is currently met by the supports that are being provided. And if it is not, then with the person's agreement, you need to update supports to mitigate the risk to the extent possible. So that might be changing the support instructions in the throughout the day section of the Part 5, which will be added to the new 3.3 ISP. That there's a space in the Part 5 that enables you to write instructions for supports that are consistent across services and across settings. You could add it there. You could add it under existing instructions for established support activities, or you might add some support activities under the routine health and safety life area. The idea, though, is that the person agrees to those changes. So, for example, if someone you notice has been maybe shuffling their feet more or demonstrating some concerns with balance, and you're concerned about a falls risk, something that you might do within the scope of your practice is remove area rugs to kind of help mitigate that risk of falling. Well, you want to talk to the person and say, this is something that we can do to help you be safe and reduce the risk of you having a fall. And so if that is something that you put in place, you would make sure and document that in the person's plan and make sure that that support is provided going forward. What you don't want to do as a provider is include risk mitigation that must be ordered by a qualified medical professional unless an order has been written. So if you're concerned with someone having trouble swallowing, you would not take it upon yourself to place that person on a puree diet. Right? You would want the person to be evaluated by a healthcare professional in order to make that sort of decision. If you have any questions about what sorts of things are clinical and which sorts of things aren't, you can always reach out to the Office of Integrated Health and talk to one of the nurses to help get clarification on that. You also want to include any monitoring or any emergency response steps that will be taken in the ISP. So if what you've put in place to mitigate the concerns looks like it's not working, you might need to take some emergency response steps, pull the team back together, and relook at how you are mitigating that particular risk. So this bottom section right here is a snapshot from the RAT itself. It says individual declined referral to a qualified healthcare professional. That first box in blue is when the team confirms, there's enough supports in place right now that we think it mitigates the risk sufficiently. And if you think it doesn't mitigate the risk currently, then you want to check other. And we're working with OIH to do some modifications to the RAT to enable you to wrap text in this other box, so that if you do decide that you want to remove throw rugs, maybe increase the person's reminders to slow down when they're eating meals, as in the example here, that you'll be able to put a sentence or two in that section to say, this is what we're going to modify. This is where it's going to be in the plan. We're going to monitor and follow agency procedures for emergencies as well. So a little bit more space for you to address those risks within the scope of your practice. All right. On the last slide here, just remember, if a potential risk is identified, you want to have it confirmed by a qualified professional in order to include clinical supports in the ISP. If the person declines consultation, then you must confirm that enough support is in place with existing health protocols, medications, etc., to mitigate that risk. And you also want to make sure that if it's not, that you are doing what you can to mitigate, monitor, and respond to any identified potential risk as well. Finally, just remember, teams must address all health and safety needs for continued access to DD waiver services. So if you find yourself in a position where you feel the person is declining consultation and you're being creative and trying to support that, and you're putting things in place to mitigate the risk, if health and safety continues to be a concern, you certainly want to bring the team together and look at whether or not waiver services can in fact meet that person's needs. So that is still sort of the bottom line with waiver, that health and safety needs to be assured. All right, so that's all I have for you today. Thank you very much. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Jakuta Williams.
All right, awesome. Had to find my mute button. If anybody's like me, you have about 20 seconds to go ahead and stretch yourself out for this second half of our presentation. I'm Jakuta Williams. I am part of the Incident Management Unit with the Office of Licensing. I'm going to be reviewing incident examples One thing to keep in mind, these incident examples that we came up with, they're not all inclusive. So there's just a couple of different scenarios, a couple of different recommendations. We really trust that you all are a bunch of professionals. So we ask that you get around the table with your teams when it comes to the identified solutions to mitigate recurrence, and also the provider's corrective action. Really dive deep into these incidents and put some substance to these reports when it comes to what action steps you're taking in order to ensure or to mitigate future occurrences. So the first example we have is aspiration of pneumonia. I'm going to read the scenario and then give our recommendations. Once again, these recommendations are not all inclusive, so it's depending on your services, depending on the individual that you're supporting, and a couple of other factors. So for our first one, we have an individual who ate her lunch around 12 noon. The staff prepared pasta with chicken and vegetables and Alfredo sauce. She also had a fruit cocktail cup with Crystal Light tea and water. Per dietary orders, food was prepared to chop texture with added moisture. The individual was reminded to slow down as she was eating fast. While seated in an upright position at the table, after finishing her food, the individual regurgitated a piece of cherry and fluid. Then she also vomited. She was transported to the ER for evaluation, which resulted in a diagnosis of aspiration pneumonia in both lungs. The hospital aftercare summary stated to give her puree diet and to follow up with the primary care physician, or PCP, within the next few weeks, or within the next week, excuse me. So if you're visualizing the CRIS report and you're going down and it's kind of like midway, it's right after the description of medical treatment provided in findings section, there's a section that says identify solutions to mitigate recurrence of incident when applicable. In simple terms, is how are we going to ensure that either the outcome of the incident is less severe or the frequency, becomes less of the similar incidents. So there's 4 things for this incident was recommended. It said the individual's current dietary protocol was in place. However, it will be updated. The team, including the day program, will meet to review ISP and ensure that new protocol is in place. A diet order was upgraded to puree from chopped texture diet. Kitchen appliances to puree the food are available in the home. And finally, review OIH aspiration pneumonia safety alert. For the provider's corrective action, it says conduct a RCA, or root cause analysis, training all staff on the dietary protocol changes, ISP modification, if new diet orders are prescribed, etc., and meet with team to review plan. So if you notice in the provider's corrective action and also in the recommendation, if you notice in parentheses, it says train all new staff. Well, there is a box in CRIS, we have boxes, and boxes are categories that we see frequently, but there's also a text box in there. So if you're under provider's corrective action and you're actually selecting the train all staff box, ideally what we would like to see is in the text box, what are you training the staff on, and just making sure it's relative to this incident and relative to mitigating the recurrence of the incident. Our next example is choking. So in this scenario we had during the lunch meal provided by the residential provider, the individual was observed to have some discomfort as evidenced by their head slumping forward. Day support staff assessed the individual by looking at her in the face and asking if she was okay. The individual's face turned purple, then she vomited. Staff shouted, "She is choking." Staff positioned the individual and while administering abdominal thrust, the individual vomited again. Food dislodged and breathing, and then returned normal. Provider called 911. EMS completed a full assessment and determined no further follow-up was needed. Current dietary guidelines were implemented. The DS staff break certain food items into smaller pieces to ensure food meets dietary requirements. Recommendation. So for identify solutions to mitigate recurrence of incident, in the future, individuals' lunch will be checked upon arrival to ensure the meals meet dietary requirements. If there are any items that do not meet the doctor's order, a call will be placed to the residential provider to request a different food be brought by lunchtime. The day support will also have a substitute food item available that meets requirements for dietary plan. The day support provider contacted the residential provider and substitute decision maker to notify them of the incident and requested a meeting to discuss needed professional assessments and plan changes. And finally, review choking health and safety alert and review nut butters and choking health and safety alert. For the provider's corrective action, we said conduct RCA or conduct root cause analysis, train all staff. We're training all staff on the change in the procedure for checking food items, and meet with the staff, meet with the support team to review the plan. And in parentheses, we're going to say to discuss needed professional assessments. We have an example of a fall. On the afternoon of 2/1/2022, while getting out of his bed, the individual fell and hit his head on a chair and sustained cuts above his right eyebrow. The residential manager called 911. The individual was transported to the ER for medical evaluation and treatment. CT of the head without contrast imaging was completed, and he was diagnosed with fall, initial encounter, and abrasion of the forehead, initial encounter. Discharge instructions included to follow up with his primary care physician and return to the emergency department should his symptoms worsen. The recommendations for this was to assess the room or environment to see if there was any need to rearrange furniture or to do some type of environmental modification, including ensuring that the food was clear of any hazards or items that may cause the individual to trip or to slip. So we're basically looking at a basic fall risk protocol in that regards, right? Discuss incident with the PCP to request if the individual may need further assessments. Train all staff with any changes in the ISP and review fall protocol. Review OIH, fall safety alert. And then for the provider's corrective action, we say conduct RCA, environmental modifications if needed, obtain additional services, assessments if prescribed by physician, and to meet support team to review the plan. And finally, on our last scenario, we have an individual had a phone call with family, and after the phone call, the individual came into the living room with others. The individual became defensive and asked about his phone call, and when asked about his phone call, was getting angry at the peers and for making jokes that the past individual had been fine with. The individual began to yell and curse and stated that he wanted to get back at everyone and ran to his room. The DSP went to check on the individual, and the individual disclosed suicidal ideations while talking with the DSP. The individual admitted to his family, or admitted to missing his families, wanting to go home or to die. The individual continued to discuss how he was going to kill himself and the ways that he could do it. Due to the individual reporting suicide thoughts with intent, the individual was taken to the ER for evaluation. an individual was able to contract for safety at the hospital and was returned. So the recommendations in this case, after reviewing, was to document in the plan that the phone calls from home can cause or may cause significant stress and sadness and may be a trigger. Another one could be to monitor individuals' mental health status, to provide problem solving and coping skills, and also making an appointment with a crisis counselor or outpatient mental health therapist. Provider corrective action for this would be conduct RCA, determine need for additional mental health supports, or to modify the ISP based on the feedback from the individual and any additional assessments completed by the counselor. All right, so we just reviewed 4 different types of incidents, 4 different types of scenarios, recommendations, and providers corrective actions. Once again, these are not all inclusive. So what we do ask is that if you're stumped, if you just hit that part where it's like, wow, what's next? Reach out to your IMU specialist, your IMU regional specialist in your region, and we'll be sure to, walk you through, ask the right questions in order to get the right response. Also, just keeping in mind when we're dealing with situations and the provider's corrective actions and the identified solutions to mitigate recurrence, it was mentioned earlier. What we're looking for is we're looking for the right now. So we understand that, hey, still have to care for this individual. So what is the provider doing in the immediate? We understand, root cause analysis may take some time, but in the immediate, what are we doing to ensure this individual's health and safety? What are we doing to make sure that, hey, this person had a fall this morning, it's a possibility this person can have a fall the afternoon, the evening, the night. What are we putting in place? And just communicating that to the Office of Licensing through your documentation. We always say you're out there, you're doing all of this work, at least give yourself some credit. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, and it's going to review the care concern threshold criteria. If you all remember, when we started with IMU, we had about 5 or 6 different care concern thresholds. Now we're down to 2. These are the 2 that we're focusing on. These are the 2 that we're tracking. So we ask that you do your due diligence, and you track and trend along with us. You start to put some things in place in order to lessen the chance, as we say, or mitigate some of these occurrences that lead to care concerns. So for the first care concern threshold criteria, you see multiple being 2 or more emergency room visits or unplanned hospital admissions for a serious incident. Those serious incidents being categorized as falls, choking, urinary tract infection or UTI, aspiration pneumonia, dehydration, or seizures within the last 90-day time frame for any reason whatsoever. So on our end, if we're getting reports dealing with these within the last 90 days and it's multiple, 2 or more, then that will escalate it to a care concern. Our next care concern that we're looking at is any incidence of Decubitus ulcer diagnosed by a medical professional, an increase in the severity level of a previously diagnosed Decubitus ulcer, or a diagnosis of a bowel obstruction diagnosed by a medical professional. So what does that mean? We go to the hospital, we get the diagnosis. The diagnosis says Decubitus ulcer, or it's an increase. It went from stage 1 to stage 3 to stage 4, or diagnosis of a bowel obstruction. We are reviewing those for care concern threshold, or care concern threshold. And what does that mean? It means it's a extra eyes are being placed on that in order to see how we can help, as far as we being the Office of Licensing, Office of Integrated Health, Office of Human Rights, if there's any information that we can share in order to assist the provider with this in regards to these thresholds or these care concerns. So it's not always, I know sometimes it's like, hey, they're out to get. No, we're out to assist. We're out to support. So really keep that in mind when you're in communication with us. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce the next person, Ms. Deborah Volt. Ms. Deborah Volt, she has our serious incident and risk management.
Good morning. Thank you. So providers' risk and quality management programs should include the review of serious incidents. So this graphic cycle represents that continuing sequence of stages, tasks, or events. It's a circular flow because it's ongoing. The process for reviewing serious incidents and responding to risks should be outlined in the provider's risk management and/or quality improvement program. So all of this works together to address risk and improve services for individuals. On the next slide, we have created what is called an at-a-glance flowchart, and it's intended to be a visual for providers in dealing with incidents. So it begins in the top left-hand corner. So a provider becomes aware of an incident, and it needs to be recorded. The type, the reason, the demographic information, all of these information is included. And if it's a level 1 incident, it will be documented for internal tracking. If a level 2 or 3, it will be reported in CRIS within 24 hours. And you'll notice that this flowchart includes the regulation to which the provider should refer. If it's a level 2 or a level 3, a root cause analysis will be conducted. But there are several questions that are to be considered here. Is it a care concern? Are there changes to the individual's needs, medical or behavioral concerns? Is the current care plan adequate? Is a more detailed RCA required per the provider's own policy? And then finally, you take action to address the root cause. Now on the next row, it's the quarterly review. And this is where data from serious incidents and care concerns should be reviewed. The individual care concern LSA notification report from CRIS should be included in this quarterly review. At a minimum, you should list each type of serious incident and count how many of each one happened. Is there a pattern? Were individual care concerns appropriately reviewed and addressed? And then again, you're taking action to address root causes. And then we get to the bottom row. And there the provider annually conducts a systemic risk assessment, or it may be called a systemic risk review. And this is again in compliance with regulation 520C and 520D. So you review the trends of serious incidents over the past year. What type of incidents happen most frequently? Which incidents have or could have resulted in the most harm? Were there common root causes? Also in compliance with 520D, the systemic risk assessment should include a review of those care concerns. So do you see any patterns or trends? What do the care concerns indicate about the risks faced by individuals served by your organization? And based on those findings and answers to those questions, you then take action to address these risks. You may update policies, incorporate any of the risk into your risk management plan for the coming year, or you may add a measurable goal or objective to your annual quality improvement plan. So again, you either take action or you continue to monitor, but it's a flow chart that shows how it's a continual process. And we hope this can help prompt providers how to ensure risks are being addressed at an individual level and also at a systemic level. So if we move to the next slide, we think it's important to remember that data is critical. So as indicated in that flow chart, providers should be collecting incidents in some format in order to analyze the data and respond according to your own policy. So you could track incidents by type of incidents, but also by individual. You could use a simple Excel spreadsheet, such as I did here in the example, to help the provider look at incidents over time across the service and also by individual. So in this example, there was a fall with laceration for Mr. Doe in October and then again in March. Well, the fall in March met the provider's threshold for conducting a more detailed RCA. The example states that the provider's RCA policy is that a more detailed RCA will be conducted when two similar level 2 serious incidents occur to the same individual or at the same location within a 6-month period. So remember that regulation is at the bottom of the screen there, 160E2, about developing and implementing a root cause analysis policy. So in the next slide, you may ask, well, what is involved in a more detailed RCA? I encourage providers always first to refer to the regulation and to the guidance, and then to your provider's policy. A more detailed RCA could entail convening a team, collecting and analyzing data, mapping processes, charting causal factors. It does not need to be a large team, but the team's purpose is to collectively look at the incident as well as the individual's whole plan of support. The team may want to look at all incidents for the individual over several months to see what's changed. Are the same type of incidents occurring more frequently? Are they happening at the same time of the day or in the same location? So it may be helpful to actually create a timeline. So that's on the next slide. We see how you can create such a timeline. So if we go to the next slide, this is just like a example of how they could say we had the fall occurred in March and then back in October. But what happened in between is the individual presenting with new risks. The team could review any level 1 incidents that could demonstrate a change in status. They could review medications to determine if there were side effects of a new medication. Were there any new diagnoses? All of these and many other factors could provide more insight into what could be a root cause of the most recent incident. And now we move to the next slide again, where we show that cycle. And so we have incidents, we have root cause analysis, we have care concerns, and then we have the systemic risk assessment, which is required again by Regulation 520C and D. So just a few reminders on the next slide. The Office of Licensing has put out a sample document of how to do a risk assessment. And, you know, every provider has different risks. And so the purpose is to identify harms and risks of harms and to realize that there may be so many risks that you may need to prioritize what you're going to address first. So the whole purpose of that systemic risk assessment is to identify trends, lessons learned, whether the care concerns are being addressed according to your policy. And if there were no care concerns in the past year, you should be documenting how you will address care concerns if they occur in the future. And so now I will ask Lakeisha Steele, the IMU CAP specialist, to go over licensing reports.
Hello, hello, hello. Happy Thursday. You could be doing so many things this morning. We're so glad that you are with us. We are in the home stretch. I am Lakeisha Steele, as she said, a CAP specialist with the Incident Management Unit of the Office of Licensing. Let's talk about everyone's favorite happy mail, licensing reports. Okay, so it may not be your favorite happy mail, but they are still very, very important. And at the Office of Licensing, we are trying to make them easier for you to track, complete, and submit with the implementation of the Connect system. So let's start there. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide. How to view licensing reports in the Connect system. So you're not getting emails from us anymore. You're getting emails directly from Connect. You want to make sure that you log into your Connect provider portal. Open the Provider Corrective Action Plans dashboard. Here you'll be able to identify the licensing report you wish to view. Click on the View CAP link, and it will open up to the licensing report details. Once you open up that CAP, you'll be able to read, respond, and print the report out. This dashboard provides a place where you can see all of your CAP. It also details their statuses, so you know which CAPs still require your attention. Connect provides that centralized location to complete and submit CAPs to the Office of Licensing. So let's talk about how to do that successfully. We did identify about a couple of months into the Connect implementation that CAPs were providers were believing that they submitted their CAPs, but we were not receiving it on our side. And we found out there was a simple solution to that. So once you have completed your response in Connect, you want to go down to the bottom of that page. There is a submit button which says Save Response. You want to click on that Save Response and do not navigate off the screen until Connect refreshes. This is the $1 million tip to resolve that issue. You stay on this page. Once Connect actually processes it and submits it on our side, you will be taken back to the Provider Corrective Action Plans dashboard. And instead of seeing the View CAP link, you will see Returned, and there will be no link, because now that CAP has been successfully sent to us, and now the ball is in our court. If for some reason your submission was not successful, when you go to the dashboard, you're going to still see that View CAP link. If you still see that, please go back to your CAP and make sure that you have responded to every CAP item in the licensing report, and make sure again that you do not navigate off the page until it refreshes back to your dashboard. I know we like to multitask because that is what we all do, but at this stage in the process of submitting your CAP, your best bet is to wait patiently so that we can get it on our side and it's out of your things to do list. Now, while we made some changes to how you submit your licensing report responses, some things remain the same. The licensing report response guidance has not changed. So let's go ahead and review it. Every licensing report sent through Connect contains guidance on how to complete the corrective action plan for acceptance. When the CAP is issued, you will receive a licensing report issue email from us. The guidance is located in the attached document that you can print off, send if need be to somebody else, but it contains the excerpt that you see on the screen right now. These are all the 4 points in detail that you need to respond to in order for us to consider the CAP for acceptance. So let's take a look at these a little more closely. Next slide. Question number 1. Please begin your responses with PR, which stands for provider response, and state the specific issue that led to the late reporting and how you corrected the deficient practice in the actions to be taken column. Details include the following. You may want to include who you trained, when they were trained, and by whom. If a meeting took place, the meeting with staff to review new and updated process, you want to include that as well. So an example of a response is listed below. A late reporting may have occurred because a user was locked out. However, every organization should have at least 3 Delta roles, one of which includes a Delta security officer. The security officer can reset passwords for anyone within the organization. You do not have to wait to contact somebody in CRIS to reset your passwords. So your response may include staff by title. Staff by title did not report on time due to being locked out of CRIS. We assigned the QDDP as the security officer, trained the new security officer on how to reset passwords using the video on password resets located on the DBHDS website. That is a great response to that initial question that gives us exactly what happened. When it comes to responding to your licensing report, we see that some people skip over this one. You may think that it's a small question, it doesn't need to be answered, but please be sure to answer this question. It really helps us identify any tools or resources that your organization may need to mitigate the specific issue that led to the late reporting. Next slide. Question 2. Include a plan of action to address systemic changes, processes, or protocols within your business to help ensure compliance to regulation in the future and to help minimize the same violation in the future. This is important to include in your response, as if it does not include it, the CAP will not be fully accepted. You want to develop a systemic plan of action. Ask yourself, does this require updating policies, procedures, or forms, or conducting any needed training or retraining for staff, or other steps that could alleviate the problem and minimize the possibility that the violation will occur? List staff by title, who is the backup with their own Delta credentials. So an example of this would be a late reporting may have occurred because the individual who enters incidents in CRIS was sent the incident on Saturday at 4 p.m. They did not get the incident until Monday because they do not work on weekends. Your response may include, and using titles only, not the individual's name. You want to include the staff who would enter incidents in CRIS on nights, weekends, and holidays, or whenever the primary person is not available. For instance, we assigned our clinical director as the backup to the QA. Delta credentials were assigned to the clinical director, and the clinical director was trained on CRIS reporting on March the 18th, 2022. What we're looking for is really like the who, what, and when in general. We're looking to see that you have a plan to mitigate the issue stated in question number 1. Next page. Question 3, include staff by title who will monitor your new procedures to ensure these violations will not occur again, and the frequency for monitoring the plan, including how it will be monitored. Every CAP response must include the staff by title who's going to monitor the new process plan or procedure. Only include the positions of employees, not their specific names. Examples of frequency include daily checks, weekly case note review, monthly audits, weekly chart reviews, quarterly checklists. You get the idea. We're looking for a frequency and how. For example, owner will perform a daily audit to ensure incidents have been entered during the required time frame. This will occur for a period of 3 months to ensure a new process is being successfully implemented. And if there are no further incidents of failure to report on time, the owner will perform the check monthly on an ongoing basis. This is a very detailed response, but it contains everything you need and then some to get that acceptance as it relates to this particular question. Question number 4. By what date you will have the completed and by what date you will have that completed should be entered in the plan completion date column. Actually, in Connect, there is a field now. Once you enter that information in the field, Connect will put it in the appropriate column. And our guidance is that the plan completion date must not exceed 60 days from the CAP due date. These are the 4 basic questions we need responses to consider acceptance. But this is not an exhaustive list. Based on your responses, we may have other questions. When that is the case, they will be listed in our response with a new CAP date of 10 business days for you to respond. Next slide. Right now, I'd like to say thank you. We have implemented a new system, and in spite of some of the challenges you face in the system, many of you are responding before the due date, which is amazing. And more of you are submitting responses initially with the basic 4 questions answered. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And let's talk about corrective action plan do's. Do remove all identifiable health information from the CAP response actions to be taken. Names, telephone numbers, record numbers, emails, any sensitive documents that you feel you need to submit to us, please submit them as attached documents in Connect. Use neutral references for individuals. They, them, their, his or her is acceptable. Ensure your comment in the actions to be taken field under the provider's response for each citation. Indicate your risk managers by title in Connect when you go in to update your contact list. If we see the title as risk manager, we will send it to them in addition to whoever is identified as the main contact. So this will ensure that they will get the emails at the same time as you do. Please be sure to reread and ensure continuity, spell check, and grammar check. When you get an email notification from us about CAPs, please read them. There may be new due dates to be aware of or attached documents to help you or your staff. If it's indicated that you will be training, we might send you that document with the training link so that you can provide that to the members of your organization as an easy reference to be able to go and get them trained, so they're not trying to find things on the website, but they have a direct link. If you do not receive an email that has the word accepted when you get it back from us, that means there is a new due date with questions from the Office of Licensing that require answers for acceptance. So just be sure to really pay attention to those emails as they come across in your mailbox. Next slide. What are some of the things that we should not do? Please, please, please do not attach a document with your CAP response in it. Provider responses must be written in the actions to be taken field. Attached documents should be support documentation to the CAP response only, or documents that we put in there for your organization to take a look at. Don't forget to spell out acronyms the first time you use it to ensure clarity and understanding on our part. Don't forget to consistently use individual 1, individual number 2, not client number 1. Like, do not switch back and forth between individual or client, because it could cause us to unnecessarily go back to you to ask more questions, because it may present some type of confusion. And don't forget to spell check, grammar check, and reread. This word's missing or anything, go ahead and fill that stuff in so we can have the most complete document as possible. Thanks. Next slide. let's go through a few guidance reminders. On October 2019, we basically went out and said that all organizations should have a backup person. And so I'll read there. It says all providers are required to have a backup person to enter incidents into CRIS. When one individual is locked out of CRIS, the backup individual will be able to submit the incident within a 24-hour time frame. All providers must notify the Office of Licensing IMU at incident underscore. And let's see, you can't see it on the slide itself, but it's incident underscore management at dbhds.virginia.gov instead of your licensing specialist when you're unable to enter the incident in CRIS because the system is down. We need to identify those as quickly as possible so that we can make sure that we do not inadvertently issue a citation if it was in fact that you were having problems because CRIS was down. In August 2020, we went through valid reasons for not reporting a serious incident into CRIS, and they are the CRIS system was not functioning at the time the incident was discovered, or the provider was unable to access CRIS system for reasons that were not in the provider's control. If the provider is unable to report a serious incident through CRIS system, one of these valid reasons, then the provider must notify the Office of Licensing using that same email. And just as a reminder, please note, being locked out of CRIS is not a valid reason for late reporting. And next slide. Okay, here we go. In August 2020, please note that the methods below talk about reporting an incident in place of submitting an incident report into CRIS. System will be deemed as non-compliant and the provider will be cited. Reporting a serious incident to the provider's licensing specialist via email or by phone call. Reporting a serious incident to the provider's human rights advocate via email or phone call. Reporting the incident to any other representative of DBHD by any means other than the serious incident reporting function in CRIS. Reporting an allegation of abuse and neglect that also meets the criteria of a level 2 or level 3 serious incident, not only on the serious incident only on the DBHDS Office of Human Rights side of CRIS, instead of reporting the incident on both the Office of Human Rights and the Office of Licensing side. Next slide. So let's talk about a few pieces of information as it relates to the licensing report. IMU has 7 business days to process incidents not reported within the required time frame. Per internal protocol, the triggering event for progressive citations is the occurrence of a regulatory violation after a licensing report has already been issued for the same regulatory violation. If several violations of a regulation are noted at one time or at separate times prior to the issuance of a licensing report, all of the violations should be documented within one report for one regulatory violation. If a separate violation of the regulation is identified after a licensing report has already been issued, then the provider should be issued an additional licensing report with a citation detailing the identified deficiency. For example, if it's discovered that a provider submitted multiple late incident reports over a single weekend, the provider would be cited one time for the late reporting. And this would not trigger a progressive citation. But if the licensing specialist issues a licensing report for the late reporting and the provider has submitted their CAP one time and it has been accepted, and then the provider fails to submit another late incident report 2 weeks later, then a new licensing report would be issued for this violation. This would be a second citation and could trigger a progressive citation. The IMU will issue a licensing report within 7 business days of determining an incident was submitted late, and therefore it's possible all violations identified over a 7-day span may be included within one licensing report. So let's look at this a little deeper. Next slide. When we talk about progressive citation, it's important to understand the rolling 12-month period. Our definition is a 12-month rolling year means a period of 12 consecutive months determined based on the dates of the last citation issued. Let's see it in action. Next slide. The progressive citation period began in October 2021. In the example, the provider received their first licensing report in November 2020. They received another citation in June of 2021 and one in February of 2022. And let's assume that all the citations listed above are accepted. In the 12-month rolling period from October 2020 through September 2021, you see there are 2 citations, one in November and one in June. The one in November would be the first one. The one in June is the second one. And that second one would be a systemic citation. In the 12-month rolling period from December 2020 through November 2021, you will see that there is only one citation that's accepted, and that is in June of 2021. In the 12-month rolling period from March 2020 through February 2021, you will see that there are 2. The one in June would just be your first non-compliant. The one in February is going to be a second citation, and it's going to be non-systemic. So today is April the 28th. The rolling year for any citations issued today will go back and we'll start from April 29th, 21 through April the 28th, 22. If we look at that time period above, we will see that there are 2 citations in that time period. First one in June, and the second one in February. That means if I issue a citation today, this one will be the 3rd citation in the progressive citation cycle. So this is how we determine the rolling year and what step you are in the progressive citation cycle. Next slide. So we're going to take a little break and we're going to look at some numbers here. And we'll look at the IMU data. But for the sake of time, we're going to skip ahead a little bit more. So I'll highlight a few things, but then we'll move forward. So on this page here, I just want to note that we're talking about only DD series incidents for fiscal year 2021 through fiscal year 2022. And as you can see, at the end of the fiscal year 2021, we had 9,753 incidents just for our DD providers alone. And where we are right now is 7,741. So we are probably going to exceed last year's total based on what we see here. But the important thing to note is that the percentage of incidents that were reported on time. As you can see, fiscal year 2021, we were into the year at 91% being reported on time. As of right now, we are currently at 93%. That is an increase and another reason why we had some time in here to say thank you. Let's move to the next one. So for our non-DD data, you will see we have much more than we had before. But if you look at the number of incidents where we ended fiscal year 2021, it was well over 11,000 incidents that were reported. Based on where we are right now of 8,996, yeah, we're probably going to end right about the same or more. But the important thing again on this one is how many were done on time? Fiscal year 2021, we ended at 92%, and we are currently at 94%. And that is awesome because we are moving in the right direction. Let's look at the next slide so we can see this in a nice little picture here. This graph represents 7 quarters of data from July 2021 through March 2022. And if you look at it, you see we had some up, we went down, which is what we wanted to see, but we crept up just a little bit. Okay, so we'll talk about that. But let's highlight just 1 quarter, January through March 2022. We had a total of 6,320 serious incidents, and 5,872 of those were on time. We have 448 late reports, and the number of excused was 281. And we issued citations for 167 of those late incidents. So I know that number of excused may jump out at you just a little bit. And let's take a look at that. If you look in the graph and you see where we started trending up, that is in the quarter representing October through December 2021. That is right after we had the Connect conversion. And so we all know that there were some challenges, okay? And that's why you see the increase in late reports, because there were system issues going on. And in the last quarter of January through March 22nd, you will see we had quite a bit of issues in October. But as we stated before, if Chris is down, that is an excusable reason for late reports. So, and that's why you see the number of excused incidents being so high, is because we needed to go ahead and excuse those, because that was because the system, Chris was down. So you weren't negatively impacted. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like totally as it relates to your ability to submit the incidents on time. Let's go ahead to the next slide. And I am happy to report good news. This chart is totally trending up. That means that you guys are doing an awesome job with reporting serious incidents on time, even with the issues that we've been experiencing lately. In July 2020, on-time reporting was at 89%. But look at you now, on-time reporting is at 97%. So that's why I say thank you, thank you, thank you. Because that has very little to do with us. That is all on you guys. So thank you for allowing us to share some of this good news with you. Right now, I want to turn it over to IMU's Acting Manager, Michelle Laird. You all are most familiar with her as the Region 3 IMU Specialist.
Thank you, Lakeisha. We wanted to take just a few minutes today to let everyone know that Stella Stiff is no longer with the Office of Licensing or DBHDS. So in the meantime, I've been acting Incident Management Unit Manager, and my phone number is posted in this chart. We will keep this slide in the presentation, and it will be posted, of course, on the website. So you can contact me directly at that number. Each region, however, is assigned an incident management specialist. Those are listed in this chart. For Region 1, that's Brian Dempsey. For Region 2, that's Lisa Lingette. I myself am assigned to Region 3. For Region 4 is Jakuta Williams. For Region 5 is Dave Wampler. And again, Lakeisha just spoke, and she is the primary contact for handling citations for the state, for the Incident Management Unit. So We're going to, again, leave this in the presentation and you'll be able to view that. But this information is also posted under contacts on the department's website. Next slide. This slide represents the contact information for the Specialized Investigation Unit. Angelica Howard is the incident, the Specialized Investigation Unit Manager for this team. So her information is posted on this slide, and you will be able to, of course, contact your regional specialist that you can find here as well. So we're going to leave this slide in the PowerPoint presentation. And I do believe, based on the time that we have remaining, that we are most likely, we are going to have to wrap up the training for today. We recorded each question that was posted in the question and answer box. And we are going to develop a frequently asked questions. That documentation, along with this recording, will be posted on the department's website. And we want to, again, thank you for your time and your attention today. We know you're very busy, and enjoy your day. Thank you.